Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 181 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle, StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days for just $1, and if you have a staff of 2 or more and you want to sign up as a group, we have a special membership offer for you, up to 50% off, depending on how many people you got. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. Remember, this is the best place to have access to Coach Boyle. He's on the forum every day. I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. Want to get in touch with me, shoot me an email to StrengthCoachPodcast@gmail.com. All right, on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about his article, Closed Pack, Open Pack, and a couple of forum threads, one called 14-Year-Old with Chronic Ankle Pain, another one called The Biggest Question in Strength and Conditioning. That and much more coming up on the Coach's Corner in a little while. Aaron McGurr from Perform Better joins us to talk about the current sale and the Mio Group heart rate system. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, Alan Cosgrove is on to talk about tracking your numbers. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, I have Bobby Smith, owner of Reach Your Training Potential, or RIPT. That's a facility in New Jersey. Bobby is a former high-level javelin thrower who now trains all kinds of athletes. He's speaking at the Complete Speed and Power Summit in May. So I got him on to talk about his training as a javelin thrower, how injuries have impacted his programming, and all aspects of speed and power. That and much more coming up from Coach Smith in a little while. For the Art of Coaching with Exos, I have Nicole Rodriguez on to talk about the topic of relatedness, creating individual challenges, purposeful struggle. For the Functional Movement System segment, Frank Dolan is on to finish his series on a review of all the 7 screens for the FMS. Today he talks about the rotary stability screen. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. How are you?
All right, I'm doing great. I am talking to Michael O'Boyle on St. Patrick's Day, although this won't be out today, but still, it's a beautiful day here too, and I'm hoping to go for some corned beef and cabbage in a little while. So, Coach, let's talk about your article, Closed Pack, Open Pack. I'm still a little confused as to why it's so important, and obviously just with the shoulder stuff that you were talking about seemed pretty important. Give us an overview, little definition of closed pack, open pack, and really why we should know this.
You know, because it's the position in which the joint is maximally tensioned, maximally positioned to do the right thing, that closed pack position. So if you want to exercise in that. If you want to look at joint play, then you want to go to that position kind of where you've unraveled it, so that you have the maximum movement to see how much movement that you have. And it's just trying to make people understand. I think the big thing to understand from the article is that we can't be doing external rotation with our arm at our side. And so often you see people doing these internal external rotation exercises at what I would call it 0 degrees of abduction. And what we're looking at is being at a position where we're at 90 degrees of abduction, and then I guess 45 degrees of shoulder flexion if we look at it as it exists in the frontal plane. And that becomes that closed pack position of the shoulder, and that's where the ball and socket are best positioned. It also becomes more, you talk about that kind of sport-specific position. Okay, I need to be stable. I don't need to be stable with my arm at my side. And that's why I think sometimes when people say, they're not a fan of isolated rotator cuff work, I'm not a fan of isolated rotator cuff work where someone lies on their side and does external rotations to facilitate their external rotators. But I am a fan of isolated rotator cuff work where somebody is in that 90-90 or 90-45 kind of position to work those muscles. And I guess more than anything, it's just exposing people to more ideas and more terminology. Because as I said, my friend Dan Dyer used to always talk about, we want to be in that closed back position. I was like, I don't know what that means. and I never really took the time until a year ago when I started writing that article to look that up and say, what does that actually mean and what is the difference? And to me, the biggest thing that it's indicative of is how much we don't know. And because I think there's so many people in our field who feel like they know it all. And I'll give you a really good example. I had to do a continuing ed class for my National Athletic Trainers Association certification. So in order to stay in ATC, they now make you take one evidence-based course. You can't just do seminars. So instead of me going to the Perform Better seminars, something like that. And what I realized is I was overdue, and I said, okay, I just have to take an online course. So I picked up I looked through the course, and it was like, okay, Leon Chaitow, positional release. And I thought to myself, I don't really know what positional release is. This is a good course for me to take because I don't even know what it is. And if there's something that I'm completely in the dark about, I need to go back and look at that. And at first I was like, oh, this physical therapy stuff is boring. It doesn't really apply to me. I don't know why I did it. But then there was some great breathing stuff in there. There was some great stuff in there about soft tissue work and about creating ischemia. And the idea they were talking about how exhaling helps us to move our spine into flexion in our lumbar spine, and how inhalation helps us to move our spine into extension. And I started to look and realize these were like 1990s studies that they were quoting, looking at breathing and how breathing affected mechanics. And I'm thinking, you get another really good example of how much we don't know and how much stuff is out there and has been out there for a while, but we just haven't figured out how it's applicable to fitness, how it's applicable to strength and conditioning. So I guess that's all I'm really trying to get people to see.
All right, good stuff. Coach, there was a forum thread, 14-year-old with chronic ankle pain, and he had put out her FMS and no asymmetries. Only thing she got bad was the trunk stability push-up, which was 1, toe touch cleared, but there's right ankle, that was her painful side. And one of the things, you were kind of doing your detective thing, which was great. You were like, what does she do? Then you're suspecting that you may be incorrect, but it sounds like she's overscheduled, overplayed. You were thinking overuse joint issues from maybe too much jumping. What sports was she playing? Can she get a doctor's note to get her out of gym class? Is the pain active, and can you provoke it? One thing that I wanted to ask you about this whole thing, if you could just kind of comment on it. The girl's 14. She's 5'10", 181. No one really mentioned that. I'm just wondering, is she maybe, that size? Maybe can someone that big not handle that kind of size? I don't know. I'm just wondering because she's only 14.
Yeah, I would say she's probably... At 5'10", 181, she's anywhere from a little overweight to a lot overweight, depending on what she looks like from a frame standpoint. And in truth, I didn't really, and that's a really good point, I didn't focus as much on that as I did on just I try to ask the questions that I would ask if the kid was in front of me. And I think that's the biggest thing. So you can look at, okay, FMS scores are this. All right, we have some idea sort of how she moves in a static sense. But what I want to know is sort of how frequently is she moving? What exactly is going on here that might be causing this? Because right away I go to automatic, okay, overuse. There's something going on here and that's why, you get into like, oh, she does track stuff and runs stadiums or runs bleachers. And I'm like, okay, now I want to know what track stuff is, because I think so much of our ability to problem solve for anybody, not just for a kid in this situation, but for anybody, is our ability to do the detective work, to ask the right questions. And I think sometimes, look, we always go to the site, can you do an FMS on them? Well, that's great. I'm glad you did an FMS on them. But even doing an FMS on the person, if that doesn't prompt you to then ask the next right question, you may not have found the answer, because you may have looked and thought, okay, everything's normal. from a movement standpoint. And as you said, everything was normal. Twos, no asymmetries, a little bit of core strength issue, which, I mean, if you said I got a 5'10", 181 14-year-old, what do you think the trunk stability push-up score would be? I'd be like, might be a 1. So that wouldn't, that wouldn't really have surprised me. But more importantly, on the bigger scale, you get into that, well, what is this person doing that is causing this to happen? Because I do this with clients all the time. And I'll ask them, questions like when people come in and my, whatever, my wrist hurts, my shoulder hurts. And the first thing I'll say is, have you done anything different? Have you chopped wood? Have you sawed wood? Did you turn a lot of, because I've had people with forearm pain when I say, did you turn a lot of screws? And someone's like, oh my God, I put a piece of furniture together yesterday. And I had to, I didn't have a power screwdriver. I turned probably 100 screws. And I'm like, okay, there's our answer. There's why your forearm hurts. There's why your rotator cuff on that side hurts, because you underwent this really significant asymmetrical stress that you're not used to. And I'm always trying to go through that detective process with them, because I just feel like stuff doesn't drop from the sky. Yeah. You don't suddenly wake up and think, wow, I got a sore ankle. Where did that come from? There is just always cause and effect in the world. And what we've got to do is be better at dialing in. And obviously, I always think that's what I love about the FMS. Helps you to structure your questions. That's the thing that I think it does better than anything. When you start looking like, okay, why is this like this? Why is this happening? And I always think, the FMS is strictly sort of the first round of clearing tests. Okay, all these things are normal. But even if I said, all right, but I got 2s here, why do I have 2s? Why don't I have 3s? All right, I need to go back and look at the person's shoulders. I need to go back and look at the hips. And I may go back and I always said, more of what somebody might see as a conventional lower quarter exam. Throw them on the table. What's their internal rotational area? What's their external rotational? Like in isolation. What is their hip? How much hip IR do they have? How much hip ER do they have? How much hip extension? What's their Thomas test look like? And, and keep working through the layers of this thing, as opposed to simply saying, okay, I did the FMS. I think the FMS is great, but it's the starting point, not the end point. And it's what leads you to the next round of questioning. If something doesn't pop right up, you think, boom, all right, I did the FMS, and I feel like I got my answer. It's more a matter of, all right, I did the FMS, and now I've got a bunch more questions, but I can be a lot more focal with my questions based on what I know now. Yeah. That's going to work a lot better.
Yeah. I'm surprised Brett Jones didn't ask for a video of the hurdle step, because I would have thought with that, because she had the dorsiflexion, the difference in the left ankle had the 4 inches of dorsiflexion, the right ankle had 5.5. Also with that pain, probably with some weight bearing, that surprised me that it was a 2-2. So just again, more of those questions, and I think.
But when you think about, I always say, and this is what I go back to, and actually Lee's coming tomorrow to do an FMS thing for us at NBSC. You really have to kick the hurdle over to get a 1.
True.
So that's why I always think sometimes we nitpick about 2s or 3s or 1s or 2s, but really the 1 in the hurdle step is they kick the hurdle step over 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
So you don't see, at least in my experience, you don't see you see lots of 2s, very few 3s, and very few 1s in at least hurdle step. And I think there are certain things in the FMS that kind of fall that way. I would say rotary stability. It's pretty rare to see a 1 rotary stability, and it's pretty rare to see a 3. You see lots of 2s, and I think with lots of stuff. Whereas with inline lunge, I think you see lots of 3s. So shoulder mobility, I think you see lots of 3s. But there are certain things that are, most notably, I said rotary stability and hurdle step, where people kind of drop right in at 2s, pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, speaking of questions, we had a forum post the biggest questions in strength and conditioning and exercise physiology, and he was asking, I guess, for some, there's, what questions do we want to see from the research perspective? You kind of, not that you had a one-track mind, but one of them was makes you think most that, unilateral versus bilateral lower body. Another one would be unilateral versus bilateral lower body power training, so hops from first jump, single leg Olympic lifts. Also something in the area of bilateral deficit. But, you felt really another area was the effect of the rear foot elevated split squat on hip mobility. Stuart McGill and Vernon Gambetta have both made rear foot elevated split squat claims based on hip damage. When we did poll the site last year, nobody had said that they've seen any of that. But I just wanted you to comment on some of that idea about the research in the bilateral versus unilateral.
Yeah, I just think that it's still an area where, and I think I wrote it in the thread, we talk about that idea of, the three stages of an idea. And, you talk about this, violent opposition, and then you sort of end up at, I've been doing that forever kind of thing. I think we're somewhere between violent opposition and I've been doing that forever. We're making progress, but I think there's been one or two research studies out that have showed this, but I don't think there's enough people out there that really understand the concept of bilateral deficit. I don't think there's enough people out there that have looked into the research of single leg versus double leg. So I just think it's an easy area for somebody to do some work in. And as I said, I think there are some people who are making what I would consider to be unsubstantiated claims of things, like Stuart will say. And obviously it's hard because I love Stuart. I've learned so much from him. But he talks about damaging the pelvic ring and disrupting the SI joint. And we just haven't seen it. I don't know where, and he's obviously got a very unique subset of people that he's seeing because everyone is going to see him as a back problem. That's all he's seeing. So it's sort of like he's seeing a sample that's probably 100% injured. And then we're seeing a sample that might be closer to 100% healthy. And in our 100% healthy clientele, we're not seeing the things that he's seeing in the injured group. So I think it would be interesting to have people look and just study, okay, what happens? We did split squats with X number of people, and then we polled and looked at the incidence of back pain and said, okay, do we have back pain? Or do we have hip pain? Do we have SI joint pain? Because I think it's easy to say, yeah, this is happening, but I don't think it's quite as easy to substantiate those thoughts, to be able to look and say, yeah, I believe this is happening, and I had a sample of X and blank people. If I had a sample of 100, then whatever, 10, 20, 30, 40 out of 100 were complaining of back pain. And I know in our case, if that was the case, we wouldn't be doing that exercise. And we're talking about, we've done it now with thousands. And the only thing we've seen is a decrease in back pain, not an increase. We've seen the opposite of what they're claiming.
Yeah, but the only caveat, I guess, to that would be also, are they, if they're not doing some of the other things, because like your programming is focused on other things, like, for example, like the quote unquote injury prevention stuff with your warm up. Your programming is that sound where that's something that's such a big focus of yours, your progressions and regressions. And so I wonder if that could be as part of it as well, is that, somebody's going in there trying to lift, going too heavy with the rear foot elevated, maybe not getting, I wouldn't say Vernon Gambetta is doing that. Obviously he's a great coach, but maybe other, like the people that Stuart are getting, that could be a possibility too.
Right. And I think that's why we had that other thread going on. When you start talking about vertical tibia, when you start interpreting what some people see when they see a split squat, that's why I posted that goblet squat video of me yesterday, because I think that everybody that bilateral squats has some forward lean. Yet some people in the split squat are critical of forward, there's too much forward lean. And I'm like, well, if you look at it, there should be some forward lean. We just don't want that forward lean to be excessive. And I don't want there to be a big anterior weight shift. But I expect when they go down into that version of a one-leg squat, that their torso is going to angle forward very similar to what it would look like in a two-leg squat.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is they're now leaning forward with half the weight that they would be leaning forward with before, and that should cause less disruption as opposed to more, at least, again, in theory. So that's why I think, really, from a research standpoint, I'd love for more people to substantiate this, because if I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong, and if I'm right, I want to have more data that I'm right.
Yep. All right, good stuff. As always, some great discussions going on the forum. So, Coach, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks, Ant.
All right, now it's time for the Ask the Equipment Experts with Perform Better, and I am here with the number one expert, Erin McGarr. Erin, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
All righty, let's just start off with the sale. What do you got?
The sale right now, it is spend $150 or more and receive 20% off. So we're going to be running that for a little while. I know we normally have the buy more, save more, but this is actually just the spend a lot, save a lot. So we're going to be running that one. And then in addition to that, we still have some items on our closeout special. We have steel plyo boxes, the black frames and the white frames that are up to 60% off. We have some mats, Arex mats, and just regular mats with eyelets that are 50 to 70% off, which is a little crazy to me. But and then we have a roller that is similar to the trigger point roller. It's called the Thing. I love it, but we are having it on closeout, so those are like $15 or $16, and they're only going to be around for about another week or two. So definitely take advantage of that if you can.
All right, very cool. We were talking earlier about kind of the popularity right now of these group training heart rate monitors and some of the advancements in all the technology. We know Coach Boyle and like Exos, they were using these things for a while. Alan Cosgrove, they've been using them for a while at Results Fitness. Talk to us about the new Mio system and the technology behind it.
Well, the Mio group heart rate system, it is a really, really cool way to show heart rate in a group setting. The biggest difference that we saw with this one as opposed to a lot of the other ones is that there's no chest strap involved. So that has been such a huge factor. I know a lot of people now are looking for different heart rate monitors for people to wear, but the biggest issue that we've been hearing is that people don't want to wear a chest strap. Or if they do want to wear a chest strap, it's just harder to get people to come in, hop into a class, and be like, oh, shoot, I forgot my chest strap, things like that. So if people don't want to purchase their own heart rate monitor and keep their chest strap, now everything is done by infrared technology. So hospitals actually started using this technology a while ago, and then it's been moving into more of the fitness and sports performance field. So that's probably the coolest feature I think about it, is that it's just a wrist strap. It's infrared technology. There's no chest strap with it. And what it does, everything's Bluetooth, and it works with a hub and a router, and just if you have, Wi-Fi, you just plug in the little hubs that come with it, and you can display it on a television, on a laptop. We have one here in the gym that actually we had it on a projector on the wall the other day, but it does everything from max heart rate, does calories, burns, and it shows different colors. So you can set it. We have it set where there's 5 different color zones. So I was in here with Rob the other day, and we were trying to see who could burn more calories and whose heart rate could go up more. And I destroyed him just because, it was Rob. So it's pretty cool because we're all very competitive here. So when we were able to kind of do our workout and see who's slacking and who's not. But like if you're working in a really high zone, it can turn red on the screen, so at least you know. And it's an easy way to monitor kind of how people are working, the percentage they're working at, the rate they're working at, how many calories they're burning, which nowadays people love to see that. And the really cool thing about it is once your profile's in there, which all you have to do is log in when you start the class, as soon as you finish and you log out and you end the workout, it emails me all of my information for what I did in that session. So it's instant feedback. It's pretty cool. And then another thing I like about it is they have an app on your phone. So when I'm not in, the gym at work and I don't have the system in front of me, I can still have the heart rate monitor on and be working out at home and still be able to keep track of everything. So it's pretty cool in that aspect. Again, I love the fact that there is no chest strap. They've been great to work with. I love the feedback from it. So it's been doing really well, and I hope that more people will start to kind of look at it and take interest in it.
All right, that's awesome. I mean, it's great that just technology's really gotten so much better, cheaper, less intrusive. So it's great to see kind of what's happening with some of this stuff. So good stuff from me out there. Well, that's going to do it. So thanks again, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Hey there, Strength Coach podcasters. This is Nicole Rodriguez for the Art of Coaching with Exos. Today we're going to continue on the topic of relatedness and demonstrate what drills we put to use to achieve this goal. Last time we spoke about building trust and showing empathy to get the players to relate to you and each other. Today we will look at creating individual challenges within the context of a unified group effort to create a common bond. We call this purposeful struggle. So let's start with timed holds. We do time holds in various positions, such as the squat, the RDL, chin-ups, split squats, for the effects on isometric strength and mental resilience. We find that these movements we're about to highlight result in the music getting turned up and everyone accepting the don't quit mentality, which helps build relatedness. Some days we go with no music here, but usually it's cranked up pretty loud. So let's highlight the chin-up. The chin-up will start with a 20-second isometric hold at the top with the chin above the bar and the elbows driving down. We usually have 15 athletes in a group, so we break them into two groups so the resting group watches the working group and vice versa. Time progressively increases to 30 seconds before we switch to a 3-position isometric chin-up hold, with the first position with the chin above the bar, second position elbows at 90 degrees, and third position arms at 3/4 of full extension. This is a very difficult drill for most. And when we have light athletes or very strong athletes, we will overload them with weight vests or chains. The struggle is real here, and everyone always comes together after one of these sessions. Next, we will always compete and shoot for the highest wattage on the Kaiser Power Squat. After performing a 6-rep test, we have a baseline number to reference and program off of. So day 1, athletes know they are competing for the highest wattage, which gets magnified as the load starts to increase and numbers get progressively higher. We do ranges of movement such as drop squats, non-counter movement squats, counter movement, and continuous squats. But every week we perform a Kaiser Power Squat. We are getting the players to rally around each other when they're shooting for their PRs. And finally, we have the infamous Exos metabolic circuits with the Kaiser functional trainers. These time sets will get anyone taking off their shirts towards the end of the session. First, we pick 4 to 6 movements. These are usually auxiliary movements that can be done for numerous repetitions. We have a preset load and a preset time, and the name of the game is don't stop moving. When the athletes start to slow down, we simply let out 2 to 3 pounds of air so they can continue at a constant speed. So here's a sample day. We'll pick 5 exercises here. So half kneeling lat pull down with the handles all the way up, half kneeling overhead press with the handles all the way down, a standing chest fly, handles even with the chest, a supine bicep curl, and a tricep extension. The players will work a 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off interval and will rotate through twice before giving a 1-minute break and going to the next exercise. This metabolic circuit is definitely a speaker duster here. In the end, it's not about motivating athletes. Rather, it's about creating an environment that allows them to motivate themselves. For more information about this topic, please look into our Phase 2 mentorship and visit us at www.teamexos.com/education. Thanks again for tuning in.
All right, guys, this is Alan Cosgrove, Business of Fitness segment. Once again, here on the Strength Coach podcast, one of the only podcasts that you should be listening to on a regular basis. This time we're going to talk about tracking your numbers, right? Tracking your numbers is one of the most important things you can do in a business. What tends to happen is people look at their numbers at the end of the month and they see what happened, right? How much money did we make? Wow, cool, we made 10 grand. That's exciting. What I want you to do is to start tracking the last 3 months, right? So if this is January, you're going to track December, November, and October, and you're going to track the same month last year. So you'll add in January last year, because our businesses do have a seasonal trend line. Right? We do have a little bit of a seasonal part of it. Like you do pick up in January, February, you do quieten down in the summer, right? With if you're running golf programs, there's times when the golfers are back on the course and they're not, in the gym as much. So you do have a little trend line you have to take into account. Now, with those 4 months, right, you total those up, divide it by 4, and you have an average. Right? You have an average of your what an average monthly income is. I suggest adding 5 to 10% for growth. Right? So let's say the average comes out to be 10,000. Right? We want to add somewhere between 5% to 10%, so $500 to $1,000, and we set that goal for the next month. So the next month, we're setting it for January. The next month will be 11,000. Right? Now, how do we hit that number? Well, first of all, you minus any contracts you have that are already getting billed, any money that's coming in, and then the rest, maybe you have to make another $5,000. Well, that's 4 weeks, so that ends up being around $1,250 per week. If you're open 6 days, it's about $200+ a day, and if you're open 8 hours a day, we're looking at somewhere around $25 an hour. How do we generate that? But we can generate that through new members. That's your biggest one, getting new members coming in, referrals. Number 2, through additional sessions, maybe additional programs like a nutrition program, an extra class, some type of an upgrade. Extra sales like t-shirts, supplements, things like that, any products that you can sell. But this is the part is that we have to have a plan on how to create this money. But the numbers shouldn't be so high that you're absolutely baffled as to how you're going to make it, right? Because you've made it before. You've made it in the last 3 months, and you've made it in the same month last year. This is the average of what you've done with a small amount of growth, right? So the idea is you start the month with a plan on how to make money. You're starting the month with really an outline of what you have to do, right? And then you're going to break it down. So we know how much money you want to make for the month. We break it down. We minus all your receivables, all the money that's coming in on contracts, and then we divide it up by the number of days you're open, and that gives you a daily number that you have to bring in every day to hit your goal for the month. So the plan is to not go through your business month just reacting. You're going to be proactive with a plan on how you're going to generate more income this month than last, how you're going to help more people. Right? So this week's lesson is tracking your numbers. We go off a 3-month average, the last 3 months, plus the same month last year. So what you've done recently, plus the seasonal part of it, you get an average, you add a growth factor, and you come up with a plan to hit it, instead of just looking to see what happens at the end of the month. So that is it for this month, guys. That's a boring one. No one likes to talk about numbers, but when you're in my coaching group and I'm consulting with you, the first question I ask every month is about your numbers. So I need to know where you're at. That's when I was in the hospital, several years ago. The doctors come in and they check your vitals. They check your blood pressure. They check your temperature. They check your respiration rate. Right? They check your heart rate. These are the vitals. These are the vital numbers in your business, right? How much money is coming in every day. So that's it. My name's Alan Cosgrove. This is the ResultsFitnessUniversity.com Business of Fitness segment here on the Strength Coach podcast. Any follow-up questions, guys? I'm on the forum in the business section, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Hi, this is Frank Dolan for the Functional Movement Systems segment. We'll be today continuing our series and concluding our series on the FMS Basics, a review of the Functional Movement Screen Fundamentals. In this segment, we'll be talking rotary stability. We'll cover some verbal instructions, your tips for testing, the criteria for a 3, 2, 1, or 0, as well as some testing nuances and possible common questions and mistakes people make on this test. Let's start out with the verbal instructions that we want to use with the client when we get started to make sure we maintain consistency and reliability of the test. We're going to start out by asking the client to let us know if they have any pain with any of the movement. Then we'll have them get on their hands and knees over the 2x6 so that their hands are under their shoulders and knees are under their hips. It's critical to look at 90 degrees at the shoulders and 90 degrees at the hips. The thumbs, knees, and toes must contact the sides of the 2x6, and the toes must be pulled towards the shins. At the same time, they're going to reach their right hand forward and right leg backwards, so a simultaneous reaching with the arm and leg like you're flying. Then, without touching down, touch the right elbow to right knee directly over the 2x6 and return to that extended position or that flying position, and then return back to the starting position in quadruped. You can ask them if they understand the instructions and obviously make sure that they perform this test on the opposite side as well. So we're going to test the right side and then we're going to test the left side. We're scoring the moving arm, so when we are testing, if we're moving right arm and right leg, it's going to be the right side. When we check for a 2, I'm getting ahead, but when we check for a 2, it's the moving arm. If we check right side arm, left leg, we're still scoring the right side in that case. We will then go ahead and let's get to some of the actual criteria for the test. To get a 3, we're going to have them reach out with the arm and leg on the same side, so it's a unilateral repetition, and the touch of the elbow to knee must be over the 2x6 board. To get a 2, if we see that they cannot perform the 3, they fall over or they lean to the side or tilt, we would check to see if they can touch opposite side elbow to opposite side knee. So if they perform a correct diagonal repetition, they get a 2. We also want to make sure that we see that the diagonal knee and elbow meet over the 2x6 board. And then if they can't do the 2 test, they would get a 1 on that test. So inability to perform a diagonal repetition would result in a 1. And again, if there's any pain with any portion of this test, we want to make sure we get that evaluated. There's also a spinal flexion clearing test with this one, just like shoulder mobility and trunk stability push-up has a quick clearance test. This one is just sitting back into child's pose, reaching the arms all the way overhead. We're just going to check and make sure that they don't have any pain with these maximal ranges of flexion and extension. So a painful indication here is going to lead to a positive for pain here. And if there is no pain, then we mark it a negative for pain. So moving on, let's take a look at a couple of tips for testing. We want to make sure that if the client is unable to perform a unilateral repetition, we instruct the client to repeat with a diagonal pattern for a score of 2. So as mentioned earlier, they can't get a 3. We check for the opposites to see if they have a 2. If they don't have a 2, it's a 1. The upper moving limb is going to indicate the side being tested as a review. Make sure the unilateral limbs remain over the board to achieve a score of 3. So to get that 3, we can't have them reaching all the way out over the top where they're not touching elbow to knee over the 2x6. That could be possible without having them get the 3. So let's make sure they're touching over the board to achieve the 3. The diagonal knee and elbow must meet over the board to get a 2, and that's if it's the diagonal pattern. Same issue there, just different scoring. And then we want to make sure that the spine is flat and the hips and shoulders are at right angles at the start. So we want them in that good, solid quadruped position with hands below shoulders and knees below hips, 90 degrees at the shoulders, 90 degrees at the hips. We're definitely going to retest or repeat the test on both sides, I should say, to make sure we're getting an indication on each one. Some of the nuances that could often be missed, as mentioned earlier, we want to double check, make sure we're always going back to that 90-degree position as we get them to try each test again. So make sure they don't sit back further or come forward more. That's going to change things. I see a lot of trainers sometimes and coaches get a little bit liberal with their 2s on this one. So a diagonal repetition should be under control. If you're seeing excessive flexion maybe on the T-spine, and just a lack of balance as they go through the test. Remember, we're taking a snapshot of the movement pattern. If it doesn't look like they have the stabilization or motor control through this alternating pattern of opposite arm, opposite leg, it should be a 1 in that case. We want to, as sort of mentioned here, we want to watch for excessive flexion on the back or the front side. So typically you'll see more of an upper body flexion. It's pretty rare that you'd see more flexion at the tailbone or at the hips, but you possibly could see it. There should be sort of a symmetrical flexion of the upper body and the lower body when they reach to touch elbow to knee. We shouldn't see excessive on one side or the other. Okay, and then one last thing is that the 2x6 does matter. So the distance between the hands and the knees. Don't try to save money by doing this test on your own, just on the floor, because that does make a difference. It's going to be a whole lot easier with your hands and knees close together. So we want to make sure we have that same 6-inch gap between the hands and the knees and feet. So that has been our testing for the rotary stability test in the functional movement screen. This is going to conclude our series on the FMS basics. It's been a pleasure to be able to share this information with you. Obviously, you can get a lot more information by going to functionalmovement.com to continue with some education on what to do after you're able to screen someone successfully. Where do you go from there? The screen's always going to tell you your next steps. It's a great idea to go ahead and learn from the guys at Functional Movement what those next steps would possibly be once you get your raw scores. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with a Strength Coach, and today I have on Bobby Smith. He's the owner and founder of Reach Your Potential Training. That's ripped. And Bobby's a former football player and javelin thrower from Monmouth University. He used to train under Martin Rooney, and pretty cool. In 2008, he won the USA Olympic trials in Eugene, Oregon. Was really close to going to Beijing. Unfortunately, didn't make that. But he's also a speaker in the upcoming Speed and Power Summit with, among others, Coach Dose, Will Fleming, Adam Feit, Lee Taft. So, Bobby, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, man, really thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Now, you guys also have a DVD coming out, you and Adam Feit. What's that called?
That's Coach's Guide to Jump Training.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And we're probably going to have on all the members of this of the Speed and Power Summit, the Ultimate Speed and Power Summit coming up in May. We're going to have more details about that later. But each coach on that is probably going to do like a 3-minute segment, but I wanted to get Bobby on here to kind of launch it and talk about his. Anybody who listens to the podcast knows that I always kind of intrigued by the elite athlete who ends up being in strength and conditioning. It's very cool. Just give us a little quick. That's very cool that you won that USA Olympic trials in Eugene, and it just wasn't enough to go to Beijing. Just give me a rundown on that. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing experience. It wasn't the best day for throwing far, and I think that got to a lot of the other competitors. You know, there was a bad headwind, and for javelin, you want a tailwind, so that javelin would just die down, and I think it just was a mental thing for those athletes, and I just stepped up and rose up to the occasion. And, you know, I had the best day of my life, and I was prepared mentally, physically to dominate that competition. And I think that's what set me apart. You know, unfortunately, we have a standard that you have to reach to go to the Olympics. I was unable to hit that standard. You know, my goal was to hit it that day, but it wasn't, you know, set up for throwing far. But it opened a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, that's very cool. Talk about now because after that, I guess you still stayed in, trying to compete in javelin, so that didn't stop you from, your Olympic quest. You moved to the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, California. And obviously you're going to work with some of the best trainers, sports medicine personnel, coaches, and support staff. Give me, how has that experience, being like that kind of an elite athlete, how has that helped your coaches and some of the things you learned from kind of being at the Olympic Training Center?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. My head coach was Dan Paff, and I just learned a ton from him. And then Ty was my, individual coach. And it was just great working with these high-level athletes. And the biggest thing that it stood apart from me from watching them is they were great at the basics. Obviously there were, freak athletes, but the fundamentals and the foundation of their movements or their jumping or throwing, that's what really was an eye-opening experience to see that, it's the little things that they were great at, and that's what separated them. Obviously, genetics, hard work, dedication, but it was those things that I felt really opened my eyes.
How do you convey that to your athletes? Is it through education? Is it just through your programming? I mean, how do you really do you talk to your athletes about that and about your experiences?
No, I don't like to, talk. I mean, if they ask me, I would bring that up, but, it's not about me. And I think that's what, some coaches get caught up with of, I did this, I did that, I did that. But it's not about me. It's about them. They're paying for our time to get them better. So, I don't really talk about my experiences unless it's brought up, to be honest.
Okay. What about, those are some important things though. So what do you try to do to make sure that these guys are mentally prepared? Because you're talking about how you just felt like mentally you were ready. What do you do as a coach? What, from your experiences, what do you do in the gym that you feel like that you've learned from your experiences to help your kids?
Yeah, I think it's just, the mental toughness. And what separates, we have fat heads on our wall for all our athletes that have been with us 3 or more seasons that go to, a Division I school. And right when it comes to conditioning, I bring the group in and I tell them right away, I'm like, this is what we have today. I'm like, is conditioning fun? And no. But is conditioning a punishment? And it's not a punishment. This is what's required for your sport. And the athletes that go to those schools on the logos that you see, those are the ones that dominate in conditioning because that's what separates you on the field. And it's just getting their mindset to know, all right, this is what I have. Let's attack it. Let's get better. And no, this isn't a punishment. And, it's the little things. Get your foot past the line. Face this way when we're changing directions. And then if they don't do that, then we bring them in and then we have burpees at the end of conditioning. And then I let them know this is your punishment, not the conditioning. And I think that's, the little things like that separates our athletes when they go on the field.
Nice. Now, you've had, we're going to stay on this programming idea right now. You've had a lot of injuries, ACL construction, meniscus, Tommy John surgery, ankle reconstruction. How has that kind of shaped some of your programming as well?
Yeah, in college, I, hit the injury bug. I had 4 major surgeries and I felt like I just didn't train the right way. I would stay in the weight room for like 2.5 hours, getting strong, but I didn't do any movement. And that's where I regret not doing, like we would lift for 2 hours, then go out and run like 440s and thought it was amazing. And it's the movement aspect that I can, I teach the athletes here that I wish I did. And, when we have our football group and we just do speed and I bring them in and I'm like, gentlemen, this is what I wish I did at your age. I learned from my mistakes. I had the injuries because I just stayed in the weight room. Now I'm trying to teach you what I wish someone taught me when I was in high school, or when I was in college, how to move properly, how to change directions, how to jump, how to land. Those are the things that are going to keep you from getting injuries and separate you on the field.
Talk to me a little bit about, your programming with maybe even correctives and trying, because especially when you're working with some of these athletes and you know how it is, like you said, you were there, you want to go out there, you want to crush it. I mean, right. How hard is it to kind of convince them of some of the things that they really need to do to become better movers?
And I think that's the tough part. We see a lot of females. We're about 70-30 from female to males. And I think it's their ego that they need to check at the door. Because when they come in here, we're not touching a weight till about 50 minutes into our program. The first 15 minutes is a dynamic warm-up, a joint-by-joint approach. Then we're going into our speed and agility. Then we're hitting our plyometrics. And then we're hitting the weight room. And, for that first couple weeks, they're always coming up to me, Coach, my numbers are going down. I'm like, because you don't have the work capacity just yet. I'm like, buy into the system. Trust me, you're going to get stronger. You're going to get better. And that's the thing that you have to, get into their head is let them know it's not just about the weights. It's about how well you move, and you're going to get better. Don't worry. And I think that's tough for high school kids to accept. We have some kids that come into our program and they don't last. And I think that's it. It's the movement base. We have 30 minutes. And when we get a strong male into our program, it kind of messes it up because they need the rest that's required, but we don't give it to them because we're on such a structured, program that they don't get that rest because we have another group coming right behind them, or we have to get to the correctives or the mobility or, the core exercises. So it's getting that right into their head right from the start. And the boys that do go and stay in our program are the ones that you see that are fit, that are strong, that move well. And those are the ones that are set up for success.
Absolutely. Talk to me about, there's this idea of, getting really strong. What are some other mistakes that maybe, you look back at kind of what you guys were doing when you were a little younger, that maybe you would have liked to have done besides the mobility stuff? What were some of the things, because
I think the biggest thing, like in our program, everyone's going to squat, they're going to, bench, they're going to deadlift, but it's the things in between that. So we always start off with the explosive movement. We're really big into the Olympic lifts. So we're going to do some type of snatch, clean, or jerk. But then we're doing some type of mobility or corrective exercises in between that so that can get ready for that next strength movement. Make sure we're activating the glutes. We're getting the shoulders ready when we're ready to bench. And then, go into our major strength, but then hitting up the core, hitting up the rotation or hit the anti-rotation or anti-flexion or anti-extension, and then going into some type of pulling exercise. Everyone wants to work those mirror muscles, but it's the posterior chain that is going to be able to get us to decelerate that eccentric strength that will carry out into the field. So I think those are the biggest things is, the core, the posterior chain, matching the pushes with the pulls, and the corrective exercises that I wish I did or, we instill in our program that I feel it's just staying balanced that is the best way to stay healthy.
All right, good stuff. There's always the question about strength, though, and how much strength do we need? Talk to me about, how much strength do we need to be fast, to be powerful? I mean, you've obviously, you're at the highest level here, the Olympics, trying to be as fast as you can, with the javelin throws, and as strong and as powerful as you can. How strong do we need to be?
It all depends on how well you can move your body. Why are the fastest athletes the best at pull-ups? It's because how well they can handle their body weight. Is how strong for your body or how much you weigh is what you really need. And, first off, it's mastering your body. Like once we get these athletes in here, they're like, oh, I see all these cool things on YouTube. And I'm like, well, you can't even do a body weight squat. That's the first thing we do is an isometric hold to get down there. And if you can't do that, how am I going to put some weight on you? So it's mastering your body first. And that's what, is the big thing. And then we can build the layers on top of that.
Let's talk some about your programming. So give me like your template right now first. We'll just start out with that. Your template for, a speed program. Like if somebody's coming in, they have a decent foundation. What are some things you're really going to want to focus on in your speed programming?
Well, we always start off with max velocity. And the most important thing is body position. Staying in a straight line from your ear to your heel. I was a running back and you have that low butt, the hips go back, and it's mastering that body position first to getting their hips underneath them so they can get their knees up, start covering ground. And I think that's the first thing that we have to instill into the athletes is mastering that first before we can start moving on. So our first, is max V. So we're always going to have a day one or a day two movement because 90% of our athletes do 2 days a week because of the club sports or, the AAUs. And so day one's always some type of linear movement. So we're going to work on, max V or work on acceleration. And we take a kind of a backwards approach where we're working the max V first, because I feel if you can't master that position, how are you going to master acceleration? So I'm going to ask you to go into a 45-degree angle, but you can't even hold the max V position. So that's where we have to get that foundation first. Then day 2, we're going to work on the lateral movement, the shuffle mechanics, the defensive position, and it's mastering the athletic position. Getting down, holding that position, mastering that so we can change directions. So those are the first 2 things, is our template of our 2-day program.
Talk to me about now, like from a strength perspective, what are you going to do? What are some of the things that you will do or that you won't do? Some of the things that maybe you did that when you were younger, kind of coming up, that you wouldn't maybe do now from a strength perspective.
I think everything is full range of motion. As athletes, we have to learn and to accept that athletics is full range of motion. So when we get into the weight room, we see a lot of athletes that, I did this at school, I did that at school. Well, you're not getting all the way down here. So we're taking weight off. And it's that thing that checked your ego at the door where, you're not going to do the weight that you did at school because you're not doing it right to our standards. We want you to get all the way down into your squat. We want to make sure that you're keeping your chest up and your shoulder blades are pulled back when you're doing your RDLs. It's not about the weight. It's about the technique and setting that foundation before we can move on.
Your lecture at the Ultimate Speed and Power Summit is going to be speed and agility training for today's athlete and team. And I think just going by the description you were saying, we go to these workshops and clinics and we try to implement things, and people aren't really able to apply that stuff to the team sport, specifically court and field athletes. How can we do this? Talk to us about what you're going to be talking about at the summit.
So I think the biggest thing is what I want to get across is the mechanics, or, how do we slow it down to make sure that they're mastering these positions, and we have different techniques that we do here at RIPT to make sure that they're staying in that great max V position. And then, then we can start advancing it, adding medicine balls, adding PVCs, holding it out in front, holding it up over our head, and then going into our different acceleration techniques, going into the marching with that. Because I think everyone sees, the cool, next big thing with the speed and agility drills, with the parachutes or the chain resisted, but they're forgetting about the mechanics and the positions that the athletes need to master before they can get to those things. So also in our programming is that we do group training. And I think there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's not set up for success when you have a group of 20 kids. How can you do that? And that's where I think, is the missing link that we're, Adam and I are going to present about, is those types of movements that you can do in a big group setting.
But are we missing, like, for example, are they going to be, I don't want to say missing out, but you feel like you can do all those things you need to do because you didn't train in a group setting, when you were training, right? Is that when you were like?
I did in a group setting, not as group. Like we have classes up to 15 kids, 16 kids, but we have 2 coaches per group, and what I tell it's the environment. Once you're in that group setting, the music's blasting, you see top level athletes next to you pushing themselves. You're going to push yourself as well. And, once you get to college, you're not going to be on an individual program. You're going to be in a group setting. So it's getting them ready for that.
All right, awesome. So now let's just talk a little bit also about some of the mistakes, some of the things that because again, I think, what you're saying too is with some of these, so a lot of people want to get to their dessert, right, before the meal. They see some of these things that they feel like, is going to look good because in their business, right? You're in a business and people want to sell these things too. Talk to me about that. What are some mistakes that you're really seeing people make out there in some of the speed training?
I think they're advancing the movements when the athletes aren't ready. And it's setting up, my background, I got my degree in special education. So, I'm a teacher. So we have to have the proper progressions and regressions to set these athletes up for success. And I think coaches rush their athletes into movements that they're just not ready yet, because you have to sell. You have to give a little to get a little from those athletes, but you want to set them up for success, and it's setting the foundations for what they need for later in life. And you want to make sure that they're staying in those proper positions before you can advance it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that goes across in general with a lot of, never mind, just speed training, just, training in general, right? I mean, we're fighting against magazines and a lot of this, the infomercial.
Absolutely.
And stuff. Yep.
And that's one of the things that set us up for the, Coach's Guide to Jump Training, is seeing the jumping out there, and, seeing, we get packets from college athletes coming back, and you're seeing all these jumps, and you're like, we got to do something about this. And that's what, got us to get to, set us up for the Coach's Guide to Jump Training.
Yeah, no, that brings up another point. Is one thing we've seen on traincoach.com, and actually I have a young guy who's working for me, works at a high school. You always see this, like, having a problem with the coaches, right? The sport coaches, right? As, these guys. Talk to us some strategies that, you try to convey to some of the sport coaches with some of the things you're doing, because they want their program. So some of these football coaches, for example, one of the kid was talking to me about it, was his football coach. He's the strength and conditioning coach, but the football coach has a certain way that he wants things done. And right. How do you deal with that? What are some strategies that you've kind of dealt with the coaches?
I mean, fortunate enough, we don't deal that with that a lot. But when we have dealt with that, is showing them the plan. So this is what we want to get through in 12 weeks. This is, our step-by-step approach, and just letting the coaches know that, you wouldn't hire a history teacher to teach math. This is what we do. We train athletes. This is what we got our, education in, and this is our livelihood. So if you can listen to us, this is what we want to set up for you. And that's the biggest thing, is just communicating your point across and showing him, or showing the coach, that this is how we're going to set it up. It's just coming prepared, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. And, it's always about that communication. Whenever you can, whenever you can kind of make sure you're communicating right and you're educating them as well, and talking about what you're again, that you are prepared. So good stuff. Right. All right. Well, Bobby, the Strength and the Complete Strength and Power Summit is on May 21st and May 22nd, and we're going to have some more of you guys on here. We might get Adam on to talk about your DVD. That you guys have, the jump training. So we'll check that out, and maybe get Adam on for more than just the 3-minute segment. So thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 181 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Pryor, Aaron McGurr, and the folks over at Perform Better. You can check them out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Bobby Smith for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning and performance enhancement. Alan Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business and Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Frank Dolan in Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Nicole Rodriguez for her insights into the art of coaching with Exos. Check them out at teamexos.com/education. And of course, remember, you can join strengthcoach.com and have access to the site for just $1. That's 3 days, just $1. Once your 3-day trial is over and you become a member, you'll be able to download Coach Boyle's 2 books. Remember, this is the best place to get access to Coach Boyle. He's on the forum every day. If you have a staff of 2 or more and you want to sign up as a group like the Miami Dolphins athletic performance team just did, we have a special membership offer for you, up to 50% off. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name's Anthony Wren, and you can reach me at strengthcoachpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.